All right, this is Virgin Radio Drive Time. My name is Ben Jones, and Jim and Charlie from Simple Minds are here. And not only are they are here on the very day that their book, Our Secrets Are the Same, is out. It is nice to see you both. Welcome back to Virgin Radio.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you.
This is a joyous book, and I mean, I was just saying before we came on the air, I've been working my way through it. And yes, there's the band. But what I love about this is this bond. And actually, I read it going, I don't have a best mate like you guys have a best mate, and it made me feel a little jealous, frankly, of this bond that you've got between each other.
Well, it's funny enough. I mean, Charlie and I, we don't know any other life than the one we've had, and it's hard for me to think of a time when Charlie wasn't there, and he probably feels the same. But it is amazing how many people we meet who say, "I wish I had a friendship." Like, you know, both men and women.
Yeah.
But I suppose in the context of rock bands, it's probably fairly rare in terms of usually, you know, mates start a band and they're all for one and one for all and all the same ideals, and then a bit later on it's maybe not quite as close as they
Hold on
once
a second.
were.
You wrote the song. Okay, so you get paid more or what? All that sort of
Yeah.
Exactly.
You got a bottle of champagne in your dressing room and I didn't, and all that stuff. But seriously, I mean, it's been amazing life that we've both had. But quite often we're not the types. Although the last couple of years we've been working on a documentary, working on a book, there's been a lot of introspection, and it's not really our characters to. We're not that self-obsessed, but having taken the time out to, it's almost like joining the dots backwards.
Yeah.
It's been interesting, certainly for me. I know Charlie feels the same. I'm like, oh God, that's how that worked, and that's how that worked. And possibly the net result is we do realise that we're a lot more luckier than we would have otherwise have thought, because we just get on with it and don't really give it much thought.
There's the great expression that someone once told me, which is there's two sides to every story and then there's the truth. When you come together to sit down and write a book together, did you find, Charlie, that maybe your memories of certain key events were slightly different to Jim's memory?
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. I mean, it was really surprising, actually. I mean, by the way, if you had to put money on Jim or I in the memory stakes, I would definitely put it on Jim, because Jim can
Unless
remember.
it's lyrics.
Jim,
Which is a slight problem for a singer.
It is a slight problem. It is, yeah, but it's just, you just call it a new version.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but Jim remembers every single gig we've ever played. I mean, he can tell you the date and what time we went on stage. So my memory's a bit dodgy, Ben, but there was a few things, and one of the big ones is how we met, which is really, really funny, because I have a different recollection of how we met.
So what's your memory then? Because I guess, you know,
He
one of my
can't
questions...
remember. That's how much of an impact I made.
So, Jim, okay, let's ask you then, Jim. Do you remember first seeing Charlie?
Well, I do, and probably the context led to that, because for those who don't know, Simple Minds fans already know the story well, but we grew up in the same street, and as fortune would have it, it was then in Glasgow they were building the first sort of high-rise tower blocks, very much a 60s phenomena in the major cities in the UK. And although later on those tower blocks got a bad rap, for us it was the modern world, you know. We thought it was New York, we're going to live in Manhattan, and, you know, these towers, it all seemed optimistic, because the area Charlie and I were kind of born in was the notorious Gorbals area of Glasgow, which I think at the time, I was looking recently at the time, it would be the Daily Mail, of course, writing this, but at the time it was a toss-up between the Gorbals and some area in Naples as the worst dump in Europe. That's where we were spawned from. But anyway, 60s in Glasgow, they were knocking down half of the city and putting up these shiny new housing estates. Charlie had already moved into the estate we grew up in. It was called Tory Glen, probably the only Tories in Glasgow. And Charlie had been there a few months, and my family moved in. And typically enough, the very first day moving in, the bits of furniture, Mum said, "Get out and play," to me and my brother. Yeah. They were still building the place, so the bottom of the street was like, you know, it was a building site, but for kids it was an adventure playground.
Wow.
Sand and cement and bricks and all that stuff, especially for young boys. There was a group of kids playing at the bottom of the street, and you know, I just remember the first day moving in there, go out and play with these kids. There was a group of kids, and Charlie was one of the kids, and we've known each other ever since. He can't remember that day.
That's the story, Charlie. Just in case you need to
I've-
recount
I've
it to
got-
anybody
I've
else.
got- I've
That's
just
how.
memorised
That's
it
how
there,
you
Ben.
guys met.
I've just logged that there.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is you start this band, or you have this sort of shared passion for music. That comes first, right? How far away did the bright lights of the Rose Bowl and of Wembley and of these huge stadiums around the world, like if you're starting a band or you're getting into music, is it possible to dream that far ahead, that big?
No.
So
No, I
what
mean,
was
it's-
it then that sort of set the band off on this adventure, and what were your ambitions?
Well, I think Jim and I just, again, retrospectively, realised that we are actually a certain type, and you have to be a certain type in a band to do the touring and stuff. And I think for Jim and I, we've always just really had this kind of outlook where we wanted to go somewhere and experience stuff. You don't know that when you're young, but it was there. But the thing is, Ben, I mean, like we had it yesterday when we were travelling through London, and Jim and I, we never talk about things like this usually, but we both said like, wow, I mean, remember when we came down to London, before we even had the band, and suddenly we were on the same street or near the same street, thinking, wow, what happened? What's
It's amazing.
going on?
It's amazing how quickly the years can fly by. And there's a great section in the book where you talk about hitchhiking around Europe, which is something that you did way before the band, right? But you actually did a little bit of that. You sort of go off the road, even when the band is successful. But you're sort of hitchhiking around Europe. And what I love is this sort of serendipitous coming back to those places, those venues, those same old arches, frankly, when you are much further down the road with this gigantic band. I mean, that's a beautiful story, isn't it?
It is an amazing story. I mean, it's true. There's some phrases in the book that really pop out, and I think the idea or the notion that we had, some people have it that for some people the world ends at the bottom of your street. For others, it begins there. And in Charlie and I's case, it was always the latter. We always had this feeling. It's probably, thinking about it now, it's probably more an American ideal. Certainly people don't hitchhike anymore, but if you take, I was reading a Springsteen book recently, A Born to Run, and all Americans have that. You don't like your life, you don't like your place, you don't like your situation, jump in the car.
Change it.
And you drive to whatever. We had the same sort of sense. There's a road out there. In the case of hitchhiking, who knows what happens if you go and stick out your thumb. And the point you're making, Ben, all these years later, I still kind of think we're on that trip. I mean, it kind of never ended. We're still winging it. We're still sticking out our thumb. We're here today sticking out our thumb with this book, hoping for the best, that people will get out of it same amount of enjoyment we've had in working on it. But there's still, what are we going to do next year? Don't know. How did we get to there? Joining the dots up, looking backwards is fun. But there's a huge mystery involved as well. But I think what Charlie was saying there, as we all have, to be a dreamer's one thing. To be a doer as well as a dreamer. Because, we can all have dreams. You always think of that. I always imagine these... let's say English teachers at school, they've got their manuscript and the bedside table. One day they're going to write a play, one day they're going to write a book, one day they're going to script a movie, but it never really leaves. One day I'm going to start a band. You're going to a pub, there's always, we were going to start a band, we didn't do it. I think we were terrified of life passing us by without somehow not only having dreams, but really igniting them.
It's interesting you mentioned Springsteen. I think there are times in this book and there are times in your story where I see quite a clear comparison between you guys and Bruce in his work ethic, his songwriting, his never say no, can do attitude. And actually quite a bit like Bruce Springsteen. You didn't have immediate success with some of your first records, right?
Very true.
So how close was it to not happening after the first album comes out, you sign the big deal, global deal, like all the riches, all the blah blah blah, doesn't happen? How do you feel after that?
I think we had quite a few moments like that. Actually, I know you're going to speak to Branson later on, right?
Yes.
Well, I mean,
He saved our bacon.
kind of saved our bacon, really, Richard, because we were on the verge. I mean, we'd done 3 albums and we were just nowhere, in huge amounts of debt, and it was probably where you would, most people would quit, Ben, or at least they would. That would be they'd call it a day.
Or they might not quit. They might not have the opportunity to quit.
Exactly.
They might be, thanks very much, you're out of here.
That's pretty much it, spot on, because we were so fortunate. It just so happened with an Australian friend who worked at Virgin and was a huge fan of the band, Ross Stapleton. And Ross really just pestered Richard and Simon from Virgin, and they got him up to Glasgow pretty soon after we get kind of dropped from the label, and they took us on and took on all the debt and everything. And the first album we made was a double album, which was Suicide. But
does that kind of failure early on, though, does it strengthen the resolve between you two as the founders, as the band leaders, and as best mates, really?
People say that, people say that, and it's a nice way of looking at it, that you don't learn a lot from success, you learn a lot more from failure. Yeah. Certainly success tastes sweeter, and at the time, as long as the failure doesn't kill you, if you start a business and it fails and you're bankrupt, okay. And even again, there's different attitudes. In America, if you're bankrupt, people look at badge of honour. He's been through the trenches. Give him a job. A lot of sense in that. But at the same time, here, failure, to be tarnished by failure. I think what it was that you're learning the ropes, and you're really. Let's say it a different way, you're finding if you've got the stomach for it. I mean, it must be great for some people to turn up and they have an overnight success in that sense where you get to pass go without. But at the same time, if I look at when success eventually did come to us, people always ask, were you ready for it? I don't think you're ever ready for it, especially if you're from tower blocks in Glasgow. Yeah. But you're more ready for it perhaps than others would be, because you've been through the wars and you've picked yourself up and you've had time to kind of, especially if the success is incremental, it's perhaps not as overwhelming as it would be overnight.
There are too many moments to mention when your story is just about as big as it gets, right? But one that really sort of stands out is the Live Aid story, and there's a lovely photo actually, Jim, of your dad in the t-shirt backstage at Live Aid, and I mean, you look exactly like him.
Do I? Yeah,
you look exactly like him.
This morning I look more like my grandmother, but we'll go with that.
Tell us a little bit about those gigantic shows. Obviously there was Live Aid, there was Mandela Day, all of these incredible gigs where, right, you're playing stadiums. And it feels to me like there was no home greater for Simple Minds than the stadium.
Well, it's amazing you say that, because, of course, we talking earlier about incremental success and learning the ropes. And I think one of the greatest things for our band, although at the time, Jeopardy, we thought we were going to get dropped. We didn't know if the band was going to survive. But it meant that we went through the years, pubs to clubs to universities to theatres to not quite state arenas, and then festivals. Yeah. Because even before Glastonbury and stuff had its mainstream appeal, we were getting the chance to get on in festivals in Belgium and Holland and Germany. They weren't quite the size as Glastonbury, nothing is, but you were playing in front of 30,000-40,000 people. And I remember, we would be well down on the bill, but I remember being at those and there'd be legend names on, Van Morrison, Elvis Costello and stuff. And how can I say this? It's in no way a criticism, but I remember being in the crowd to watch them and thinking, their music doesn't suit this. It didn't, it was good, it was pleasant that we were there were great artists, you were in the presence of great artists, but I just remember thinking, this is where Pink Floyd and all that have kind of got it right. If you're going to play these places, you're going to need some dimension to the music. Well, Simple Minds just naturally had this dimension in our music. It was a big sound, and it was getting bigger with each record as well, working with people like Steve Lillywhite and such. But the upshot was that when we got to that level of arenas and then festivals and then outdoor, our sound had developed in as much that both the sound and the attitude of putting it across, that it was never easy. I'd hate you to think that we're walking on a Wembley Stadium thinking this is a dawdle, but it was almost as though the music had by that time been designed for those places. I mean, sometimes we're trying a little too hard, and certainly we got a lot of criticism in those days. The only ever time you would see us on TV would be in front of, and of course, when you're on stage in front, and Charlie and I's attitude, we're playing to the back, 60,000, so you have to be over the top. But if the camera's in the front row, you think, that guy's really over the top. I mean, talk about being messianic and all of that stuff. But I wouldn't be upset at myself or ourselves if the criticism was we're trying too hard. But yeah, you could say that Simple Minds sound works in those big places.
Do you have moments where you have to sort of sit and take moments like that in? So Live Aid, Mandela Day, it's a bit like a wedding, I guess. I remember during my wedding, I've sort of must make a note of taking this in, otherwise I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm not going to remember any of it. Do you remember those moments? I mean, I think, well, firstly, for Live Aid, you were kind of surprised that you were playing out in the States rather than playing at Wembley. Do you remember much of those big days, those key days?
Well, the thing, unfortunately, is, of course, you do retrospectively, but at the moment, I mean, for example, Live Aid for us in Philadelphia, it was a bit of a whirlwind for me, but I mean, recently, thinking back, I've kind of managed to piece together quite a lot of the day, but it was just such a whirlwind and so weird because everywhere you looked was somebody mega famous. And it was ridiculous. I mean, it was mad. You're sitting in a little room and Jack Nicholson's got his feet up on the desk taking phone calls or introducing us on stage. I'm jamming with Bo Diddley.
I'm jamming with Bo Diddley. That's a good line.
That's the bit I'm using in the promo.
That's a good line.
Yeah, and he just said to me, "Plug in and play, young man." And it was like forbidden to play because the Beach Boys were playing at that moment.
Wow.
It's funny when you say, because for obvious reasons, when we talk about Live Aid, and of course it was Geldof's thing, Geldof and Midge and Band Aid and all that, we think of it in the UK context and all the images from Wembley and all that. In America, bit of a poor second until you really think about it. And I only really thought about it recently, and excluding ourselves, although we were there. Led Zepp reforming, the Beach Boys, Jagger, Tina Turner, Dylan. It wasn't chopped liver.
It wasn't a bad day out.
It wasn't a bad day out.
You are one of those bands who are quite happy to wear your heart on your sleeve and your activism on your sleeve as well, and you've been involved in many, many key things over the years. Is there a fine balance, I guess, when you are a rock band or a rock outfit and you do it very well, and Springsteen, there he is again, let's mention Springsteen again, he does it very well, you too do it very well. Was that something that you were keen to do because you had a platform and you wanted to do it, or was that something that just naturally came out of you when you've got this audience in front of you?
Something happens, I mean, there's just something. The thing, and we had it recently, we just finished really it was a year-long tour, albeit split up, but I just love the visceral feel of hearing that sound coming out. Where else are you going to hear those huge speakers? But how are you going to portray that sound? And you have to be a performer. You have to somehow have a way of certainly my role, you're in this unique space, front men, and it usually is men then, front men. You're in this unique space between the band and the audience. And when you say is it a natural... No, I'm actually, Charlie, I'll tell you, I'm much more introverted than I am extrovert, but the music fills you up and you get carried away, and I always found that it was natural in the sense of, not that I've ever surfed, but it's almost like, here it comes, here's the wave, get on it, bring the band into the audience, and bring the audience into the band. I don't even know if that's a question you asked me,
No,
Ben, but
because
it's
yeah,
quite
I like it.
It's sort of, but anyway, it became natural. I don't know if it was. How could it be natural? We would, from where we're from, you couldn't ever dream of being in that situation, but it became natural.
Yeah, but some of the activism, or at least, you know, the Mandela and stuff. I think it was kind of I mean, in a way, I think Jim, in a way, you know, because obviously, you know, I mean, yeah, it's interesting talking about this book. When Jim talks about lyrically in the past, there's so many things that come up, and Jim's right that we were just living in these times, Ben, that were like, there seemed to be something going on all the time.
Yeah.
You know, always stuff going on, Baader Meinhof, you name it. There was like something going off in Europe, and as a writer, Jim would write about these things because it's natural, and. I mean, in a way, I don't even think that we were particularly political in a way, but mainly a lot of the things, I think, in retrospect, that we were involved in, like Mandela or Live Aid, they were kind of almost like common sense.
Well, they weren't
in a way,
political.
you know?
It was more everyone was doing it. Like, it was the
They
whole,
were-
whereas
yeah,
now,
yeah, I mean,
now
I
I
think
It
imagine.
was the kind of
voice.
zeitgeist that was the
Yeah.
themes of the day, and certainly actually picking up on your question, I didn't get it the first time. Picking up your question, we'd been influenced by so many greats: Peter Gabriel, Springsteen, Little Steven, even gone back to Dylan. The people that somehow managed to. I remember at the time, even it's probably an unlikely name to put in there, but when Prince came up with Sign of the Times, because. Always remember, it had to be in the context of a great song and a great show, and it had to be entertainment. It couldn't just be
The activism for the sake of it.
agitprop, you know, that'd be dull. But certainly going back to the Beatles, John Lennon, give Peace a chance and all that. I think in any writer, well, certainly the writers we liked, usually there was a point where they would try and tackle the big themes.
Yeah.
And so it to your question, it seemed to through time naturally feel like the thing to do.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, quite a few bands I know who come off a big tour will then sort of go their separate ways. They won't speak to each other for 6 months. They need to decompress. They need to go away, see friends, see family. You know, literally, you go your separate ways, and then you're both still on the same street. Right. So you finish a year-long tour, and you know you both go home.
Yeah, but we keep separate hours.
Yeah, that's true.
Is that how it works?
Well, we've got different takes on this, Ben. I mean, like my thing is, I'm always saying that, and it is true, which is part of what's great about. We've been so fortunate as a band because Jim's got such a drive. We finish a tour and get up at 7 a.m. to get an early flight to go home and chill. And Jim will say to me, "You better start writing and stuff for the
Got to keep
album."
them on their toes, man. You know what I mean?
And the reason why, and that's the reason we're on the same street. Jim actually lives further up the hill where he can look into my house.
Looking down at you, is
Just
he?
make sure that I'm not like sitting out in the front getting a
I'm an
suntan.
early riser. That's the last thing. Well, Charlie likes to stay up late and enjoy himself and all that stuff. But it means we can share a Vespa. We don't use it at the same time.
Wow, there's a vision I have in my head of the two of you on the back of a Vespa. Talk to me about songwriting. I'm fascinated by songwriting. I'm sort of jealous of songwriters because I thought maybe 10 years ago, I'm going to write a song. I've lived a life. I've had some good times, I've had some bad times. I'm going to write some song. It turns out it's a lot harder than I thought, right? And my question to you, when you have such an incredible catalogue of songs in your repertoire, when you wake up the next morning, what's the goal? What's the objective? Is the next song still to be written? Is the best Simple Minds song still to be written?
Well, I mean, it's funny that Charlie used that analogy there that a tour just ends and the whip's out, we've got to get on with it. The fact is, our tour, the recent tour we did, finished on a Sunday night in Sicily, in the local amphitheatre. And what's the amphitheatre? We're not talking about the Odeon. We're talking about Greek amphitheatre. I swear to God, before lunchtime the next day, he was up at my room because he stores some gear there. Where's my gear? meaning his amplifier and his guitar and his cables and stuff. He's just finished a 6 months tour, and he obviously wants to plug in and play. And why is that? Because that's who he is.
Because he loves it.
That's who he is.
You love it.
And so the answer to your question is similarly with me. You're just always creative. It's not so much of the last song's been when's the next. It's just you're always thinking about something. We see it in a good way as being a puzzle. And it's a puzzle we enjoy. You know, you get an idea and you think, I wonder if I could make something of that, or I wonder if that could be whatever. From the noodling, an idea emerges. It'll be an idea that we'll usually both get excited about, and then you try and take it to the end. And then quite often by the end you go, that's a great song, not for us. That's a really good song, not a great song. But you know, they're not. It's more that when you said anyone can write a song. Can anyone write a great song?
You didn't see mine. They were terrible.
But it's still a song. Still a song. Still a song.
You about 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, in the book, you sound like you sort of were thinking, maybe I'm done. Maybe my time with this band is over. And yet now I look at you, I listen to the music that you're making now, I see the live shows that you're doing now, and Simple Minds has never been in a better state of health. So what changed?
Shall I?
Yeah, Jim, you go ahead.
Well, I think, to put it in context, by the late 90s, we found ourselves without management, without a record deal, without a publishing deal, no one having a good word to say about us. Trying to get, by the end of the 90s, I think we hadn't had a good review since the end of the 80s. The walls were closing in, and also at that time, the walls for the music industry were closing in too. You know, you just first MP3s and all that. It just wasn't looking good. And I think the thing Charlie and I always had, we never felt anyone owed us anything, and we always felt incredibly lucky. And there's no given that it's meant to last forever, or it's meant to last for 40 years or nearly 50 years in our case. So by that time, the odds of us getting through were diminishing. But at the same time, when we've just explained that he plays the guitar because he plays the guitar, that's how he is. I write because I write. How do you give that up when there was a real dilemma, and I think Charlie, once it was a great quote. I said, I just came to the thing. It was time to give it up, and I really remember that. And Charlie chipped in and said, yeah, but that was only for a weekend. And I think that was true. I think it was in a fit of pique.
Yeah.
And by the weekend we were back. The last thing we're thinking of was giving up. But we had to head for the hills. You know, we'd had our innings. We'd had our time. There was new heroes up the pop charts. There was new bands. We had to wear it out. And at the same time, we had to have a life outside of all of this, because although we're so committed to this, there has to be a life outside it, otherwise you become really one-dimensional. There has to be kids, there has to be marriages, there has to be new adventures. In my case, I went to Sicily, and I remember going down there, and I thought, it was in the period where I thought the game was up. And, with a few friends down there, and they would say, so-and-so wants to come and meet you, he's a big fan of Simple Minds, and I'd go, no, I'm not. That's not me anymore. What are you talking about? I'm a fisherman. I don't do that anymore. It was I must have been in my Hemingway phase.
A bit like Bruce Wayne trying to quit being Batman, right?
That's a great way of putting it. But Charlie had his kids a bit later than me. We had to wear it out, and then funny enough, and also you're bored with we were running on fumes. If you've been working for 20 years, it's not on tap. We were running on fumes. But I went down there, and I remember thinking, I'm never going to write a song again, and I'm so bored with myself, and I've got nothing to say and all that. But lo and behold, when I was down there, big thing then was Italian house dance music, and the local guys would say, "Gonna come and help us with the lyrics and stuff," and I'd be like, "Well, just to be social, but I'm not getting into this." And before I knew it, I myself was back on the horse, and then Charlie, time to go to work.
And Charlie moved into the town near you, didn't he?
Eventually.
Well, okay, eventually, yeah, Ben. But I had spent a lot of time in Italy, actually, because my girlfriend was Italian. I'd spent a lot of time in the 80s, and I spent quite a long couple of periods in Rome. I lived in Rome, actually, but I mean, never quite fully resident, because we were always working, touring. But I was in Italy. I've been in Italy a large part of my life, actually, you know, and only about the last 4 years I've been in Sicily.
What's the best part of being in a band with Jim Kerr?
Oh, well, for me, it's like having a big brother who just like, he's like bodyguard, but also kind of, you know, I mean, I keep saying when I'd been playing the guitar for a week, and Jim would tell people I was the best guitar player in Glasgow, you know, and it's just always been like that, and you know that it's a head start.
You're going to ask me
really
the same question, aren't you? But I can see you.
I'm going to ask you what's Charlie's greatest attribute.
Charlie, well, there's so many. Charlie, and anyone who works with you, Charlie's the greatest guy. He's the friendliest guy anybody could ever meet, up to a point.
Oh, okay.
And then you got to work out where that point is. But I think the thing was where it really is interesting, and I think the book tries to get to that, attempts to get to that, is you would see one of the obvious reasons we get on so well. We have so much in common in terms of our background and where we were brought up and the values we were brought up with, our love of music, all that stuff. But we're actually really, really different. The obvious thing being he's a musician, I'm not. And for me, people who can play music, doesn't matter who, music's a magical thing. It really is. I mean, you can't see it, you can't touch it, but you certainly get touched by it. So for me, musicians, there's something magical about them. I've always felt that. Had I not met Charlie, I would be outside begging you to interview me about my new book of poetry, and I'm not sure Virgin Radio would be quite as hospitable as they are today.
We don't have a poetry show, but maybe that's something we can pitch to the bosses.
Absolutely.
It is a joy to spend time with you. It is the great marriage of music, I think, your relationship together, and this book is just such a beautiful read. I've really enjoyed reading it. I've really enjoyed hanging out with you. It's out today. Our secrets are the same. Jim Kerr, Charlie Burchill, Simple Minds are here. Always lovely to see you.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks so much. That's kind. Thank you.